Hermann, the German hero. 2 years passed, and it was early autumn in the year 9. Augustus woke one morning feeling quite brisk and in the best of spirits. Good news had come from Pannonia. The natives were again under control. Tiberius was on his way home, and a splendid triumph was being planned for him. The world seemed very bright. Augustus ate his frugal morning meal with positive relish and was just finishing a last fig when a small package was handed to him. Chief of his German bodyguards said that it had arrived during the night by special messenger from Maroboduus. It appeared to be a gift. With pleasure, Augustus proceeded to unwrap it. Maroboduus was the young German chieftain who had caused trouble in Vienna. No doubt he wished to show additional proof of his renewed loyalty to Rome. Then, as the contents lay revealed, the emperor's face turned gray. He stared as if he could not believe his eyes. What he saw was the head of a man, cut off at the neck. "Varus!" he gasped hoarsely as he recognized the face of the former governor of Syria, whom Tiberius had left to govern the Germans near the mouth of the Rhine. "Oh, Varus, my legions!" moaned Augustus as he learned of the full tragedy. Not only had Varus been murdered, but thousands of soldiers, almost 3 Roman legions, had been slaughtered by the Germans. "Oh, Varus, Varus," he moaned, "give me back my legions." This is the story of what had happened. To the Romans it was a tale of treachery. To the Germans of later years it would be a story of patriotism. Either way, it's one of the deciding events in the history of Europe. The chief character in the story is Hermann, a young German prince or chieftain, whose Roman name was Arminius. It was from Hermann that Maroboduus had received the bloody head of Varus. Hermann had sent it to him, hoping, with this proof of prowess, to enlist his rival's help against the Romans. But Maroboduus, now preferring safety to freedom, had sent the gruesome trophy on to Augustus, with sympathetic report of the disaster. Hermann, who was about 25 years old, was another one of those young Germans who had been sent to receive training as a Roman soldier, and was an officer commanding one of the legions under Varus. When Varus had been sent to guard or govern the German territory near the Weser River, young Hermann was back in his own native homeland. His father was king of one of the tribes inhabiting that half-conquered Roman province. Hermann found many of his tribesmen boiling with hatred for the Romans. Not all of them, to be sure. They were divided. Some thought it best to accept the Roman rule and adopt the Romans' more civilized way of living, as well as their way of fighting. But there were just as many who resented being forced to give up their old law and customs and abide by Roman law. That encouraged young Hermann in his dream of fighting for independence. As a beginning, he formed a daring plot against his commander. As governor, Varus had spent the summer going about holding court here and there, handing out judgments, settling disputes, in a harsh, unfeeling manner that was characteristic of him. September came, and considering that his work was done for the season, Varus was about to move from his summer quarters near the Weser River back to winter quarters on the Rhine. Just the night before leaving, however, Hermann told him at dinner that trouble had arisen between 2 tribes that ought to be settled before he left. It meant going northwest again into difficult country, and winter storms were on the way. Other Germans, friendly to the Romans, saw and warned Varus that it was a trap. Varus laughed loudly, being a man who could be told nothing, and said that he could rely on his own judgment, that he trusted Hermann implicitly. Indeed, he so trusted the young officer that the next morning, when they set out for the northwest, he put Hermann in charge of the soldiers guarding the supply wagons. It was a stormy day. Wet leaves were blowing. Hermann went along until they were well on into the thick forest. Then he slipped away to gather his own troops recruited among the Germans. Varus and the Romans went on hacking their way through the wet, tangled thicket while the rain increased. Soon huge trees began to topple down on every side of them. Trees which had been sawed half through by the Germans during the night. The second day the attack came suddenly. As they were struggling through a swamp, whizzing out from all directions came spears and arrows, hurled by an unseen enemy hidden in the underbrush. On the third day came the end. The Romans, retreating, had struggled to the top of a ridge, on the very peak of which stood a ring of huge stones, as an altar to the German gods. They were descending toward an open plain ahead, when down upon them like wild men, with their blond hair and beards flying in the wind, came the Germans in their iron helmets, shouting and singing songs of battle. Varus fell upon his sword, so that he was dead when they cut his head off. Only a few of the soldiers escaped to tell the tale. All the rest were dragged up to the ring of stones on top of the mountain, and there sacrificed on an altar to the gods. Their heads were later found fastened to the trees in the sacred grove. By this victory, Hermann had gained control of all the Roman forts and outposts on the German side of the Rhine. It was feared that he might cross the river and go sweeping down through Gaul. But Tiberius, rushing to meet him, held the Rhine line secure, and that was enough to do, it was decided by both Augustus and Tiberius. Never again were the Romans to establish their authority beyond the Rhine. The Germans would remain independent, slowly in their own way, develop and become civilized. And so, by blocking the spread of the Roman civilization into Germany, this victory of Hermann changed the future of Europe. How it might have differed and what future wars might have been avoided had this not been so, no one can say. Hermann's ambition was to unite the German tribes, but this was never to be accomplished. They continued to disagree and fight with one another. Only part of Hermann's own tribe ever stood behind him, and even members of his own family were against him. He was to die 10 years later, stabbed in the back by one of his own kinsmen. But future fellow countrymen were to look back upon this young Hermann as the liberator of Germany. Poems, songs, and plays would be written about him, and today a monument, a tremendous bronze statue of this first German hero, stands on top of the mountain where the victory is said to have taken place. It is encircled by that ring of altar stones upon which the Roman soldiers were sacrificed to the old gods of Valhalla.